Great. It's 11:45, and we're trying to start these sessions bang on time, and they're really snappy. So this is our new parent briefing format, which are 30-minute talks, so 20-minute talks, really, with 10 minutes for questions. So we're going to move at warp speed. But I'm going to start by just finding out a little bit about you. So could you put your hand up, please, if you have a child who's currently preparing for 11 plus tests? Okay, that's quite a large chunk of the audience. And if you think your child will be preparing for an 11 plus test in the future, but isn't currently, great. So that's more or less everybody has something at stake in the 11 plus tests. Put your hand up if the thought of the test worries you. Yeah, quite a lot of people would worry me too. So I'm not going to do lengthy introductions, but we've got a really brilliant panel to help us answer these questions. So, I've lost my place. Anna Masterson is Chief Learning Officer at Atom Learning, which is an adaptive online learning and test platform that lots of you will probably already know. Harry Cobb is Director of Tuition at Bonas Macfarlane and has overseen hundreds of successful 11 plus, 13 plus tutoring placements. And Sebastian Hepher is Principal of Eaton Square School and knows all about 11 plus, preparing students and I guess probably marking 11 plus papers as well. Yeah, better that as well. So I'm going to start with a question to all three, which is how competitive is entry to 11 plus, 13 plus? Let's start with Sebastian. For London schools.
Hello, hello. Can you all hear me at the back? Yes, fantastic. How competitive is it? Well, I've been ahead in London for 30 years, so in that time I've certainly seen it change, and it has grown in competitiveness. Having said that, though, at the end of every year when we've gone through the process, not one of my pupils has not been placed in the right school for them. So although the numbers of people sitting the exams every year seems to be increasing, I think that's more a reflection of the registration processes rather than necessarily a reflection of the real number of pupils who are trying to go through the process. So we may see an increase of, 50 to 70 pupils year on year perhaps sitting for a consortium school or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, as I said, they all find a place in a school that is absolutely right for them. And I think that's the most important message to give, and we may come on to it later, I don't know. But whilst you sit here, lots of your hands were going up either about this year's 11 plus or 11 plus in the future. The most important advice I think all three of us would give you is be sure that the schools you are applying to are the right ones for your child and not just ones perhaps that you've heard somebody else talking about and that might be a good idea. They've got to be absolutely right for your child, more than for you, if that makes any sense at all. Try and take yourself out of the equation. Try and take away your own likes and dislikes of a particular school and be looking through the eyes of your children and what's going to make it right for them. And then it will work. And listen to your prep schools or primary school heads on that subject.
Anna, from your perspective, how competitive do you think it is?
I would just echo everything Sebastian said. It is undoubtedly competitive, but it's not about the number of school places. It is about everyone wanting to apply to a certain school. And actually, you have to change that narrative and go, where's the right place for my child? You have to think that, okay, I could really, really prepare my child and we could get into a particular school, but then actually, are they going to thrive there for the next 7 years? If you've worked them really, really hard through 11 plus to get a certain assessment result to get into that school, are they then going to have what they need to thrive for the next 7 years, or are they going to struggle? So I think it is competitive, but take the competition out of it and go, what does my child need? Where are they going to thrive?
And does BM have a perspective on that?
Yeah, well, I guess interestingly, if your child is between the age of 8 and 11, they are born in a population bubble not seen since 1969. So, on that scale, there is increased competition. And likewise, obviously, I'd echo everything that's already been said, in that it's about finding the right school for your child and not for yourself, not living through your anxieties of taking tests and your school experience. Really look at the personality of the child is very important.
Yeah, but just to be practical, this session is not about choosing a school. It's about the fact that you've chosen a school and you're now got to sit this test. So let's start with Sebastian. How do London preps prepare children for 11 plus? Because remember, not all the audience here will be in a London prep, and so let's hear what the prep school perspective is on these sort of tests.
Well, I suppose all prep schools will prepare in a slightly different way, but for us, it starts right at the beginning. So when the children join us in nursery, they have the benefit of being able to look up through the years and see where they need to be at the end. So the whole journey from 3.5 years old through to 11 is tailored to make sure that they hit the 11 plus at their peak, if you like, rather like an athlete training for an event. So the whole curriculum, right from the bottom all the way through to year 6, is carefully built and staggered upwards with the 11 plus in mind. Making sure the pupils are given a broad education is really important, because although the 11 plus academic components are fairly straightforward, I think schools are now looking more and more how do we differentiate in our choice process? How are we going to select from this increasing number of boys and girls? What makes them stand out from their peers who are applying from other schools? So as a prep school, we really encourage our boys and girls, yes, obviously to do the best they can in their English and maths. We teach them all of the reasoning skills pretty much all of the way through as well. But we are also really keen that they have a very broad academic curriculum and base, because that will come through in many other ways, either at interview or indeed it could come through in questions they're asked. It's also very good for them. When the boys and girls go through this process, they have a lot to absorb and deal with as they do. And I think having a wide range of experiences as they grow through their prep years is really important to them in terms of their well-being, because if they are doing different things, if they are musical, if they are dramatic, if they love ballet or other forms of dance, if they're very sporty, all of these things clearly are going to be offered through a prep school curriculum, and they are all very important with the final product at 11. They really are. So
Sebastian's just given us the really thoroughbred approach to preparing for the 11 plus, with the 7-year build-up and a nice broad rounded curriculum that gets you there. So let's just put your hand up. Who's got a child in a state school? Right. So you're not in that position. So what do you do if you're not in that position?
So I think if you're not in that position, then establishing really good home learning habits early are vital. I think as parents, when our children are toddlers, we know how to give them that bit of extra. I think when they're in Key Stage 1 and they're learning to read, it's really obvious how we support their education. And then they get to Key Stage 2, and it's maybe not as clear what they're doing in school, what they're learning, or what they should be learning. And therefore, having something like Atom, where a child can log in, they can do some learning, and just do a little bit and often. I have 3 children, all in Key Stage 2, and they all log on to Atom for 15 minutes every morning. It's trying to build really healthy home learning activities that are really low stakes. So it's little and often, and what it means is at the weekend, as 2 working parents who are time poor, we can do all those lovely things like baking, visiting museums, all of those enrichment things, which are so important for childhood as well as a broad education. So I think if you are in a state school, extra activity that is low stakes, easy to use for parents as much as it is for children is really important. I do think one thing that's really important for state school parents is these tests test English and maths, which are obviously taught through the English National Curriculum, But they also test verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning, which if you are in a state primary, is not likely to be part of your school's curriculum. And what we know is that you don't want to over-prepare children through endless verbal reasoning tests or endless non-verbal reasoning tests. But if your child is familiar with the type of questions that come up in those tests, it just means they go into those assessments not being completely put off by the unknown. It's something they're familiar with, and therefore they can do their best and they can show who they are on the day.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that IQ tests are teachable, and you can improve your intelligence, in inverted commas, by practicing them.
I would support that Atom is a very good resource in that, and there's a kind of gamification to it where children enjoy spending 15 minutes or so on their iPad, and if they're able to do it in the morning, then obviously it gives the parent time to get changed and ready themselves. And then just to touch on Sebastian's point, the 11 plus is multi-layered. Yes, the academic component is the first kind of entrance, but there is also a reference that comes from their current school, and then also they're looking at the rounded individual in terms of what interests and what they can essentially offer the school.
So let's go to the other kind of luxury product on the platform. How does BM assess and prepare children for 11 plus?
So we're always keen, obviously, to meet parents and the child before we introduce a tutor. We're fortunate to work with an in-house educational psychologist that looks in quite a lot of detail in terms of a cognitive ability of a child. By that I mean kind of their working memory, how well they process information. If that doesn't, if that's been done before or isn't demanded by the parents, then a tutor would spend a good couple of hours just running through the key disciplines: English, maths, verbal and non-verbal reasoning. And then we would ultimately kind of set up a program based on the kind of schools that they're looking to apply to. And in addition, we run summer camps and pre-test courses during holidays and half terms.
Great. Now, we're going to start kind of pinging questions around the panel now. And if you want to ask questions, do put your hands up as we go along as well. So I'm going to start with Sebastian. If your child attends a prep school, do they need to get a tutor?
That's a great question, and one I've wrestled with my entire career, as you probably know. Maybe that's why you asked me. I'm asked this question every year by our parents. My genuine response would be no, because the school that the children are in should be preparing them well enough. Of course, on the other hand, the first question which was asked about competitiveness, if 99.9% of the population are having tutors, is my son or daughter going to be at a disadvantage if they're not? That's a very difficult question to answer. So actually the prep or primary school head should know the perfect answer in relation to your children. If there is an area where they are weaker or they've missed because perhaps you've just arrived in the country, whatever it may be, and there is not time within the set curriculum to cover those aspects, then yes, I can see a need for tutoring. Tutors will also polish and give more exam familiarization perhaps, which will help. So I now tend to sit on the fence a bit and say that it really is important actually to look at each individual child within the process to see whether they would benefit from some top-up or a bit of polish or definitely fill in a gap that was missing.
Thank you, Sebastian. There's a question at the back, but while the microphone's coming over to you, I'm going to ask Anna a question, another kind of tricky one on your home turf. A lot of schools say to us that they can't bear atom learning because children are sort of over-prepared. So the question is, can you over-prepare? And how do you avoid doing that?
Yeah, I absolutely think you can over-prepare. I think we have a really wonderful customer success team who will work with parents to say, what's the right amount of preparation that my child should be doing? And those of you that are familiar with Atom, the majority of the platform is through these fun, interactive worlds where children can practice all of the skills that that they need to practice to be learning. We also have mock tests, and we advise parents that these mock tests are there so that the child has the familiarity with the test, so that they can go into the assessment feeling familiar with what it feels like to sit down and work on a computer through a computerized test for however long it is. What we don't advise is that your child does endless mock tests, because that's really stressful for your child and not a good experience. And the analogy I always make with this is, some of you may have done the London Marathon a few weeks ago. If you were running the London Marathon, you would not prepare for it by doing 6 or 7 marathons the weeks preceding it. And actually, the best way to prepare is to listen to your prep school heads or your primary school heads, or to speak to someone who's really knowledgeable to help you to make sure that your child is happy through the process and is practicing, is learning, but in a way that's meaningful for long-term learning, not just a short-term performance.
So, I mean, the sports analogy is a really brilliant one, I think, Anna. I mean, no one would attempt to do a marathon without doing any practice. I mean, that would just be genuinely mad. And it's the same with things like the 11+ assessments as well. You know, you really should practice. But what you don't want to be doing is doing, you know, practice papers rather than reading a book or playing football or all the other things that the child enjoys doing. It's something to fit in alongside. So a question, Harry mentioned academic assessments. Should parents get their child academically assessed? What's the value of it?
Well, we think there's obviously a lot of value, particularly if a child's going unnoticed at school, they're middle of the road perhaps, they're not kind of necessarily flagged up. And by getting an academic assessment or working with an educational psychologist, you know, gets underneath the bonnet essentially, and allows us and parents and teachers, we encourage obviously to have clear lines of communication to see what students excel in and what they don't. And as a consequence, there is value often in having a tutor just to bring them up to speed in particular topics or subjects that they are struggling with, and to give them their confidence. You know, again, people talk about, is it right to have a tutor or not? But you know, we go out of our way to select tutors that are also mentors, and we hope that our tutors inspire their students beyond the curriculum to allow them to become self-motivated, to engage them in reading, which is pivotal to a student's success. So having an assessment obviously is a really good benchmark of which to map out a program.
There's a question at the back.
Hello. Hi. Yes. Thank you. I think you were more getting to the point that I wanted to, the question I wanted to ask, which is, there's been a lot discussed about academics and preparing children academically. And so my question is, for the 11+, the intense competition, what is the obligation, or what are the obligations of schools to prepare the children personally, socially and emotionally for secondary, bearing in mind that parents are not trained teachers or psychologists, and you can have the most academic child who will then flounder in an environment where there's a lot of competition or they don't feel emotionally prepared. So how does one balance what the responsibility is of the school versus what the responsibility of the parents or the home is in terms of ensuring their child's okay emotionally, socially?
That's a fantastic question. It should be very much working in tandem and in harmony. The parents and the school, prep or primary, should be working together to ensure that the children are absolutely prepared for what's going to come. We can't for a moment, I think, replace the values and the love and the care that a parent surrounds their child with, because that all feeds into who they are and how they're going to be and how strong they're going to be when they get into their senior school and for the rest of their lives. But what we can do is enhance that and build upon that and work with you as parents to make sure that the children, when they leave us, are fully prepared for what's going to come. The point I made earlier, or tried to make earlier, in having a broad curriculum, really is true of the whole school experience. We should be developing them and helping them to grow and helping them mature in every way, in terms of relationships, in terms of understanding how people interact with one another, making them more autonomous, making them have more ownership of what they're doing, so that they are prepared when they move on to their senior school. There is a danger, of course, with any entrance of process and any competitive process, that everybody's eyes move on to that, which is what I think you're saying, and everything else is missed. As a group of schools, we are very conscious of that, and I would imagine and hope that most schools are conscious of that. But it's finding the balance between ensuring that the children are prepared academically enough, whilst maintaining all of those other skill sets, which are absolutely vital. So we place a lot of emphasis on that. And there was allusion, I think, to making sure the children carry on doing all of the things they started to do when they were younger. You know, they're playing an instrument because they want to and they love it and they get so much from it, rather than it's great to put on a report. They play netball or football or hockey or swim because they love it, rather than it's brilliant to have on a report. And I give our pupils mock interviews as they go through in year 6, and I'm always really upset and surprised by the number of them who say, I used to ride, I used to do this, I used to do that, but I've stopped it for this year because of the 11 plus. And for me, they absolutely should not be stopping anything in that way, because everything they're doing is forming their character and who they are. And that's so important. So no school should be solely focusing on the academic side for that 11 plus. The long journey, the marathon of life, is far more important than that. And as a head, to my parents, our parents, that message is made loud and clear. And to all of you, you've got to be thinking about the long journey as much as this stepping stone, which is part of it. I would imagine you want nothing more as parents than to have happy children, young adults who have a fulfilling life and can give something back to the world, really. And that, for me, is far more important than that 11 plus process. So making sure the school is looking at the whole is vital.
I think also the thing to bear in mind is that not all schools have a break at 11 plus, and there are plenty of through schools at the show here today, where once your child's in, they're effectively in. And so you do have to think, you know, is this competitive exam the kind of thing that's going to suit my child or not suit my child? And that really is quite an important judgment to make.
Can I just say something there? That's absolutely right. But what we are seeing, certainly on our side of the fence, is that parents are now thinking that, and they're saying, okay, let's get in at 4 plus, or 7 plus, or 8 plus. Some have a 9 and a 10 plus, in order to avoid that process. But you're right. If you can start in a school that is an all through, then that takes away that aspect.
But then for other people, a change is a wonderful thing. You know, I went to a through school from 8 to 18, and by the time I got to 18, I couldn't bear half the class, because I'd just been in with the same kids forever and ever. So there is a lot to be said for a break, I think. Okay, so there were some hands up here. Yeah.
Hi. What would the panelists say with regards to the fact that the 11 plus, that process or that set of exams is not standardized at all? Each school sort of does its own thing. Every year sort of changes. How could a parent, what would you advise a parent to do given the multiplicity of 11 pluses and the limits on time and on maintaining this balance between a well-rounded, real-life education for children that relies on spending time outdoors, playing, all this and all that? Thank you.
Anna, do you want to?
So I think that, yes, you are right. There are multiple exams and they are all slightly different and all have their nuances. And I think that's where you go back to the broader education. You go down to like good academic education is good academic education. Most of these exams do assess English and maths at Key Stage 2, and you want your child to be doing the best they can in those subjects, not for 11 plus, but because you want them to thrive in senior school English and maths, and you want them to have the skills that they need in order to be happy, successful adults. So I think, yes, they do have nuances, but they are all relatively similar. And I think the same is true of reasoning. If you're familiar with the styles of questions that come up, then that is enough. And then I would go back to, for academics, I think the most important thing to prepare children for 11 plus or successful academic lives is to support them to become voracious readers. Reading, we know that anyone who reads for pleasure when they are a young person goes on to be more academically successful. The OECD have data that show that those guys who read for pleasure go on to have more academic success at 18. So I think, yes, there are lots and lots of tests, but solid understanding of the English and maths curriculum, because you want that for your child anyway, and then some familiarity with reasoning because it does come up, is the right way to go about it.
Yeah, just to add to that, while they all have their quirks, they all do kind of baseline themselves off the Key Stage 2 curriculum. And it's, I guess, giving them some exposure to the tests, because they all broadly follow the same format in that they're adaptive, they're multiple choice, and they're under time conditions. So as long as you prepare your child and give them the exam technique, tell them to take their time. I see a lot of students whiz through the questions and they have, at least 10, 20 minutes to spare often. So as long as you instill those good habits, they should be fine with any test they're throwing at.
And on the reading front, if your child is a reluctant reader, I've got two extremely reluctant readers in my house, read to them. And books on tape are also, or audiobooks are a really, really great thing as well. I mean, not all children do become great readers, but the chance of becoming one comes from loving it, loving stories. That's the only way to do it. So you can't kind of make someone a reader.
And using a Kindle can often be a helpful device, particularly as you can save words and store them as a word bank.
And for boys, comics, sports books, sports stories, anything. There's a question here. Sorry, could we just get you a mic?
I was just wondering how long the 11 plus has been multiple choice, because the 7 plus and 8 plus aren't. So is it a more recent thing for? I haven't quite got to that stage yet for 11 plus, or whether it will do 13 plus, but has it been structured as a multiple choice exam?
Yeah, increasingly so. Well, not forever, no. Traditionally, the 11 plus was an assessment that girls sat in year 6, and it was a traditional English and maths paper. If they did well, then they had an interview at the secondary school that they were applying to. Now, majority of first round testing is multiple choice online assessment.
Right, okay.
I mean, the other very interesting thing is that 11 plus has become quite a key part of 13 plus schools' assessment. And in terms of the point that was made earlier about managing transitions, one of the good things about that is that you kind of get your place sorted out with 2 years to go. And that means that you've got plenty of time to have a really managed transition into senior school, knowing where you're going. And for a lot of children, actually taking the stress out and knowing what the path ahead is really great. And on that front, we have hit 11, 12, 15, and we're going to have to finish. So if you want to continue the conversations, Harry's on the Bonas Macfarlane stand, which is down on the far right. Atom Learning are down on the far left. And you are by the cafe, I think, aren't you? Yeah. Great. So
Come and see us on the stand.
yes, thank you very much.